True victory is not when you make others lose, but when you become a better version of yourself against their background. Marcus Aurelius. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. The world is a chessboard, vast and unforgiving. Every soul steps onto it, blind to the rules, moving pieces they don't understand. Society whispers who to be, what to chase, how to smile. Invisible strings pull hands, hearts, minds. Most never notice. They march in circles, pawns in a game they didn't choose. The real battle isn't against others. It's against the shadows within, the lies believed, the masks worn. True power begins when the board is seen for what it is. An illusion, a trap, a chance to rise. The game starts at birth. A child's eyes are clear, but the world clouds them fast. Parents, teachers, screens, they paint a map of shoulds and musts. Be good, be successful, be loved. The child learns to hide what's raw, what's true. A mask forms, thin at first, then heavy. By adulthood, it's welded on. People call it identity, but it's a cage. They fight to protect it, not seeing it's their prison. The first step to winning is to pause, to look at the board, to question the moves made blindly. Shadows cast long webs. The human heart is a battlefield, split between light and dark. The dark isn't evil, it's the unspoken, the buried. Desires too wild, fears too sharp, shame too heavy. These pieces move in silence, guiding choices more than logic ever will. A man snaps in anger, not knowing why. A woman stays silent, afraid of her own voice. The shadow pulls the strings and most dance without question. To win, the shadow must be faced, not fought. It's the unseen player, the one that must be known. The chessboard thrives on distraction. Gold glitters, fame beckons, love promises salvation. These are mirages, shimmering lies. People chase them, thinking victory lies in having more, being seen, being chosen. But the board is rigged. The more they chase, the deeper they sink. A life spent running leaves no time to see the game for what it is. The brave ones stop. They turn inward. They ask what's real. That's when the strings start to snap, one by one. This isn't about outsmarting others. The crowd plays a surface game, trading moves for applause. The real game is deeper, lonelier. It's about seeing the board clearly, its traps, its illusions, its hidden rules. Every soul is born a pawn, but not every soul stays one. The path to power begins with a single truth. The game isn't out there, it's inside. Only those who dare to look within can change their place on the board. The next move is always waiting. The shadow lives in every soul, a silent force, unseen but relentless. It's the part of a person that whispers in the dark, stirring fears, igniting desires, hiding truths too raw to face. Imagine a forest at midnight, thick with fog, where every rustle feels alive. That's the shadow, wild, untamed, always there. It's not the enemy, though it feels like one. It's the voice of everything buried, the anger swallowed, the dreams abandoned, the shame locked away. Most spend their lives running from it, but running only tightens its grip. Picture a man in a crowded room, smiling, nodding, playing his part. Inside, a storm rages. He wants to scream, to break free, but he doesn't. Why? The shadow holds him. It tells him he's not enough, that freedom comes at a cost too steep. Or a woman, staring at her reflection, hating the face she sees. She covers it with makeup, with laughter, with lies. The shadow fuels her doubt, whispering she'll never be whole. These aren't rare stories. They're the human condition, the quiet war fought in every heart. The shadow isn't born evil. It grows from wounds, from moments when the world said, "Hide this." A child scolded for crying learns to bury pain. A teenager mocked for dreaming learns to shrink. Over time, the shadow becomes a vault, storing every piece of the self deemed unworthy. But vaults leak. The pain seeps out as rage, as fear, as choices that destroy. A man lashes out at his family, not seeing the old wounds driving him. A woman clings to a toxic lover, mistaking pain for love. The shadow plays them like pieces on a board. Facing the shadow feels like stepping into that midnight forest, unarmed. It's terrifying. The fog hides monsters, or so it seems. But the monsters are just fragments of the self, waiting to be seen. To face them is to walk through fear, to hear the whispers and not flinch. A man might sit alone, tracing his anger to a father's cold words. A woman might write her fears, finding they stem from a betrayal long ago. This isn't about fighting the shadow. It's about listening to it, understanding its roots. Only then does its grip loosen. The paradox is stark. The shadow, the thing most feared, holds the key to strength. Deny it, and it rules. Embrace it, and it becomes an ally. A person who knows their shadow moves differently. They act, not react. They choose, not obey. Imagine a warrior, scarred but steady, who walks through the forest unafraid. That's the one who's faced their dark. They've seen the worst of themselves and found it human. They've turned the shadow from a puppet master into a guide. This truth burns. No one wins the game without meeting their shadow. It's the gatekeeper to power, the riddle every soul must solve. Ignore it, and life stays a cycle of blind moves, each one tighter than the last. Step into the forest, and the board changes. The fog lifts, just enough to see the next step. The shadow isn't gone. It never leaves, but it becomes a teacher, not a chain. The game goes on, and the real players are those who walk with their darkness, not against it. The world is a hall of mirrors, each one reflecting a lie. People walk through it, chasing images of who they should be, what they should want, how they should live. Every mirror shows a different illusion. Success as a mansion, love as a perfect partner, happiness as a crowded social feed. These reflections shimmer, pulling the heart like a moth to flame. But the flame burns. The hall is a trap, built to keep souls lost, running from one distorted image to the next, never seeing the truth. The mirrors are empty. Freedom lies in breaking them. Society crafts these mirrors with care. From childhood, the rules are carved deep. Work hard, climb high, fit in. The stories are endless. Heroes who win, lovers who complete each other, rebels who break free, but always in the right way. These aren't truths. They're scripts. A young man grinds through a job he hates, believing wealth will save him. A woman molds herself to please others, thinking their approval will fill the void. They're not wrong to want more, but they're chasing shadows cast by someone else's light. The mirrors tell them where to go, and they obey. The illusion of success is the cruelest. It's a golden carrot dangled just out of reach. Society points to the top. More money, more status, more likes, and calls it victory. People climb, sweat, sacrifice. They trade time for titles, joy for numbers. But the top is a mirage. The man with the corner office feels as empty as the one on the factory floor. The woman with thousands of followers still fears the silence of her own thoughts. The mirror promised fulfillment, but it lied. It always does. The game isn't won by reaching the top. It's won by seeing the ladder was never real. Love, too, is a distorted reflection. The world sells it as a cure, a fairy tale where two halves make a whole. People search for the one, the soulmate, the savior. They twist themselves to fit, hide their flaws, play the part. A man stays in a relationship that drains him, calling it duty. A woman ignores red flags, calling it hope. The mirror of love blinds them to the truth. No one completes anyone. Love is a mirror that works only when both stand whole, not when they lean on each other to stand at all. The illusion keeps them tethered, afraid to walk alone. The deepest lie is fairness. The world whispers that good deeds bring rewards, that hard work pays off, that justice prevails. Life shows otherwise. The kind are betrayed, the honest are cheated, the dreamers are crushed. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity. The Hall of Mirrors thrives on the myth of fairness, keeping people docile, waiting for a reward that never comes. The truth stings. The world owes nothing. Expecting it to bends the soul into a victim's shape, forever waiting, forever weak. Breaking the mirrors takes courage. It's not loud or dramatic, no grand speeches, no cheering crowds. It's quiet, like a single step away from the path everyone else follows. A man quits the race for status, choosing work that lights his soul. A woman stops seeking validation, finding peace in her own skin. They don't destroy the hall. It still stands, reflecting its lies for others. They simply walk away. They see the illusions for what they are, chains dressed as dreams. The board shifts when the mirrors crack. The game changes. This act of rebellion isn't against the world. It's for the self. The Hall of Mirrors is built to keep the soul asleep, chasing what's outside while ignoring what's within. Every broken mirror reveals a piece of truth. Worth isn't earned, love isn't a prize, life isn't fair. These aren't defeats, they're liberations. The one who sees through the illusions moves differently. They don't run, they don't beg, they stand, eyes clear, heart steady. The chessboard is still there, but they're no longer pawns. They're players, ready for the next move, unbound by the lies that once held them. Pain is a flame, fierce and unyielding. It sears the soul, leaving marks that never fade. Most run from it, hide from it, numb it with distractions, scrolling screens, shallow laughter, bottles that promise forgetfulness. But pain isn't the enemy. It's a teacher, the kind that speaks in whispers first, then roars when ignored. It's the raw edge of truth, cutting through the fog of illusions. In its heat, a person finds clarity, if they dare to stand in the fire. Pain is the map to freedom, drawn in scars. Every soul knows pain's touch. A child feels it when love is withheld, a sharp lesson in trust. A teenager tastes it when dreams crash against the world's hard edges. An adult carries it in the weight of betrayal, loss, failure. These moments aren't accidents. They're signals, like a bell tolling in the dark, calling attention to what's broken, what's hidden, what needs to heal. A woman weeps after a lover's betrayal, not just for him, but for the part of herself she gave away. A man grits his teeth through a public failure, not just for the loss, but for the fear it unearths. Pain points to the wound, demanding it be seen. The world teaches otherwise. It says pain is weakness, something to bury or outrun. Society hands out masks, smile, achieve, pretend, and calls it strength. People wear them, hiding their burns, thinking the flames will fade if ignored. They don't. Pain festers in silence. It twists into bitterness, fear, or a quiet surrender to a half-lived life. A man who buries his grief becomes a stranger to his own heart, snapping at those he loves. A woman who ignores her shame shrinks from her own power, settling for less. The flame doesn't die. It grows, consuming what could have been. To learn from pain is to face it, eyes open, heart bare. It's not about wallowing or dramatizing, it's about listening. Imagine a firelit cave where every crackle tells a story. A person sits, not running, not fighting, just hearing what the flames say. A broken relationship reveals a need for boundaries, not love. A career collapse shows a life built on others' expectations, not truth. Pain strips away the lies, leaving only what's real. It's brutal, but it's honest. In that honesty, growth begins. The cave becomes a forge, shaping something stronger. This isn't a gentle process. Facing pain feels like walking through fire. Skin blistering, every step a test. A man might sit alone, replaying a moment of shame until he sees it wasn't his fault. A woman might trace her fear to a childhood wound, realizing she's carried someone else's voice too long. These aren't quick fixes. They're reckonings. The flames burn away pride, excuses, illusions. What's left is raw, but it's real. A soul that's faced its pain doesn't flinch at the world's chaos. It knows worse, and it survived. Pain also teaches through contrast. In its shadow, joy feels brighter, love deeper, peace truer. A person who's walked through fire cherishes the coolness of a quiet moment. They don't take it for granted because they know its cost. This is why the wounded often become the wise. They've seen the edges of existence, felt the weight of their own fragility. A mother who lost a child holds the living tighter. A dreamer who failed builds again, not for glory, but for meaning. Pain carves depth into the soul, making room for a life that's full, not just loud. The paradox is clear. Pain, the thing most feared, is the path to power, not power over others, but over the self. A person who's learned from their flames moves with purpose. They don't chase distractions or cling to illusions. They know what matters because they've paid for that knowledge in tears, in sleepless nights, in moments of raw truth. The chessboard hasn't changed, but they have. They see the game for what it is, and they play it differently, deliberately, fearlessly. This truth lingers like smoke. Pain is the teacher no one wants, but everyone needs. It's not kind, but it's honest. It doesn't promise happiness, but it offers strength. The one who listens to its lessons walks taller, not because they're unbroken, but because they're forged. The board is still there, pieces moving, traps waiting. But the player who's faced their fire knows something others don't. The flames don't destroy, they reveal. And in that revelation, the next move becomes clear. The world is a theater, and every soul wears a mask. These aren't just faces, they're armor, crafted from fear, polished by need. People hide behind them, playing roles to survive the stage. The confident leader, the devoted partner, the carefree rebel. Each mask is a lie, a shield against the raw truth of being human. But shields are heavy. They crack under pressure, exposing the fragility beneath. The game of masks is a dance of manipulation, where everyone plays to be seen, to be safe, to be enough. True power comes from dropping the mask and standing bare. Masks form early. A child learns to smile when they want to cry, to please a parent's gaze. A teenager mimics the crowd to belong, burying their odd edges. By adulthood, the mask feels like skin. It's not just worn, it's believed. A man strides into a meeting, voice steady, hiding the doubt gnawing his gut. A woman laughs at a party, radiant, while her heart aches for something real. They're not deceiving others, they're deceiving themselves. The mask promises protection, but delivers a cage, locking the soul away from its own truth. Manipulation is the theater's currency. It's not always cruel or calculated. Often, it's survival. People manipulate to keep their masks intact, to avoid the pain of exposure. A man flatters his boss, not for gain, but to hide his insecurity. A woman clings to a lover's approval, not for love, but to silence her fear of being alone. These acts aren't evil, they're human, but they're chains. Every manipulation ties the soul tighter to the role, further from freedom. The stage rewards those who play well, but the cost is a life lived for others' eyes. Men and women wear different masks, shaped by the world's expectations. Men are taught to be strong, to dominate, to hide weakness at all costs. A man's mask is a fortress, built to project control. He buries his fear, his softness, his need for connection. When he snaps, yelling at a partner, chasing status, it's the fortress crumbling, revealing the boy inside who was told he's not enough. Women are shaped to nurture, to please, to be desirable. A woman's mask is a mirror, reflecting what others want. She hides her anger, her ambition, her raw edges. When she shrinks, staying silent, settling for less, it's the mirror cracking, showing the girl who learned her worth lies in others' gaze. The theater thrives on these differences. Men manipulate through power, women through connection, but both are trapped. A man might push a colleague down to feel tall, not seeing it's his own doubt he's fighting. A woman might soothe a friend's ego to keep peace, not realizing she's dimming her own light. These moves aren't victories, they're surrenders. The stage sets men against women, women against women, everyone against themselves. The real manipulation is the theater itself, convincing souls to play roles that serve the script, not the self. Dropping the mask feels like stepping off a cliff. It's not loud or heroic. It's raw, quiet, terrifying. A man might admit his fear to a friend, voice shaking, and find strength in the vulnerability. A woman might say no to a demand, heart pounding, and feel her power rise. These moments aren't about rejecting others, they're about reclaiming the self. The mask falls, and the soul stands naked, not perfect but real. The theater doesn't stop, but the one without a mask moves differently. They don't play for applause, they play for truth. This act of defiance shifts the game. A person without a mask is untouchable, not because they're flawless, but because they're honest. Manipulation loses its grip when there's nothing to hide. A man who owns his doubts doesn't need to dominate. A woman who knows her worth doesn't need to please. They're not invincible. The world still stings. The stage still tempts. But they're free. Their choices come from within, not from the theater's script. They see the strings others dance to and cut their own. The paradox burns bright. The mask, meant to protect, is the soul's greatest weakness. Cling to it, and the theater owns you. Let it go, and the stage becomes just a place, not a prison. The one who stands bare doesn't need to manipulate, because they've nothing to prove. They don't need to hide because they've faced their own truth. The chessboard is still there, pieces moving, roles beckoning, but the player without a mask knows the game's secret. Power isn't in playing better, it's in playing true. The soul is a tapestry woven from ancient threads, patterns that pulse beneath the surface, guiding every step, every choice. These are archetypes, the invisible forces that shape a person's role in the grand game. They're not just ideas, they're alive, like currents in a river, carrying the heart toward courage, wisdom, or ruin. The warrior fights, the sage seeks, the shadow hides. Each archetype is a piece on the chessboard, moving through every soul, sometimes clashing, sometimes aligning. To know them is to see the map of the game, to understand why people act, why they falter, why they rise. The warrior is the spark of action. It's the fire in a man who stands against a storm, refusing to bend. It's the steel in a woman who carves her own path through a world that demands she shrink. The warrior doesn't always wield a sword. Sometimes it's a pen, a voice, a quiet choice to keep going. A father works long hours to feed his family, his body aching, but his will unbroken. A mother defies judgment to chase her dream, her heart fierce despite the whispers. The warrior lives in effort, in defiance, in the refusal to let the world dictate the soul's worth. But unchecked, it burns too hot, turning to rage or reckless pride, destroying what it meant to protect. The sage is the light of knowing. It's the calm in a man who pauses before speaking, seeing truths others miss. It's the intuition in a woman who trusts her gut over the crowd's noise. The sage seeks clarity, not just for itself, but to guide others. A friend listens as another pours out their pain, offering not answers, but presence. A leader steps back from chaos, finding a path no one else saw. The sage thrives in reflection, in questions that cut through illusion. Yet left alone, it grows cold, detached, lost in thought while the world demands action. Wisdom without fire is a book never opened. The shadow, already known, is the undertow. It's the doubt that gnaws, the fear that paralyzes, the shame that binds. Every soul carries it, not as a flaw but as a truth. The shadow isn't evil, it's human. A man hides his grief, thinking it makes him weak, only to find it fuels his anger. A woman buries her ambition, fearing it makes her unlovable, only to feel it twist into envy. The shadow thrives in denial, growing stronger the more it's ignored. But faced, it transforms. It becomes the fuel for the warrior's fire, the depth for the sage's wisdom. The shadow once known is the root of a soul's power. Men and women channel these archetypes through different lenses. Men are often pushed toward the warrior, taught to fight, to conquer, to stand tall. Their strength shines in action, building, protecting, enduring. But their shadow lingers in what they suppress: vulnerability, fear, the need for rest. A man who embraces his sage learns to listen, to reflect, to balance force with insight. Women are often nudged toward the sage, shaped to nurture, to intuit, to heal. Their power glows in connection, seeing, understanding, holding space. But their shadow festers in what they hide: anger, ambition, the need to claim space. A woman who calls on her warrior stands firm, acts boldly, balances care with courage. The game shifts when archetypes are seen. A person who knows their warrior moves with purpose, not blind fury. One who trusts their sage chooses truth over noise. One who faces their shadow acts from strength, not fear. Picture a leader, once driven by ego, who pauses to hear their team's quiet voices, blending warrior's resolve with sage's clarity. Or a dreamer, once paralyzed by doubt, who steps forward, shadow in hand, to build what they once feared. These aren't fairy tales, they're choices. The archetypes don't vanish, they align, turning chaos into a dance. The board is alive with these forces. Every soul plays multiple roles, shifting between them as the game demands. The warrior may lead today, the sage tomorrow, the shadow always whispering. To win isn't to pick one, it's to know them all. A person who sees their archetypes holds the map to their soul. They understand why they fight, why they fear, why they dream. They don't just move, they choose. The chessboard hasn't changed, but their place on it has. They're no longer pieces, they're players, charting the game with eyes wide open. This truth hums like a quiet song. Archetypes are the game's hidden rules. Ignore them and the soul stumbles, pulled by forces it doesn't see. Know them and the soul navigates, not perfectly, but deliberately. The warrior gives strength, the sage gives sight, the shadow gives depth. Together, they forge a player who doesn't just survive the board, they shape it. The game goes on, pieces shifting, traps waiting. But the one who knows their archetypes walks with a map, ready for the next move, guided by the ancient threads within. Samotnist is a desert, vast and silent, where the soul stands alone. The world paints it as a curse, a void to flee with noise, crowds, endless distractions. But Samotnist is no enemy. It's a mirror, cold and clear, reflecting the self without filters. In its stillness, the voices of others fade, and the truth of the heart speaks. This is where the game shifts, where a person stops being a pawn and becomes a player. Samotnist is the crucible where the soul is forged, not broken. The world fears the desert. People fill their days with chatter, screens, fleeting connections, anything to drown the quiet. A man scrolls through feeds, chasing voices to silence his own. A woman surrounds herself with friends, afraid of what she'll hear when they're gone. This isn't living, it's running. The noise keeps the soul asleep, tethered to the chessboard surface. Samotnist strips that away. It demands a reckoning, a moment when the self faces itself, raw and unadorned. No masks, no roles, just truth. In the desert, time slows. The air is heavy, the horizon endless. A person sits, and the silence presses in. At first, it's deafening. Old wounds surface, regrets, fears, the ache of being unseen. A man might remember a father's dismissal, the sting still sharp. A woman might feel the weight of years spent pleasing others, her own desires buried. These aren't punishments, they're revelations. Samatnist doesn't create the pain, it uncovers it. It's a lantern in the dark, showing what's been carried too long. This unveiling is brutal but kind. The desert doesn't judge, it listens. A soul in Samatnist hears its own voice, perhaps for the first time. A man might realize he's chased wealth to prove a worth he never doubted as a child. A woman might see she's dimmed her fire to keep others warm, not because they asked, but because she feared her own light. These truths hurt, but they heal. They're the roots of the self, long ignored, now exposed. In the silence, they grow into strength. Samatnist teaches what the crowd cannot. The world is a chorus, shouting who to be, what to want. It drowns the soul's whisper. In the desert, that whisper becomes a roar. A person learns to trust their own compass, not the one handed to them. A man might walk away from a life that looks perfect but feels hollow, choosing a path that's his. A woman might embrace her quirks, no longer shrinking to fit a mold. These choices aren't loud, they're quiet, steady, unshakable. They come from a place the world can't touch. The paradox is stark. Samatnist, the thing most feared, is the soul's greatest ally. It's not about isolation, but liberation. The desert isn't empty. It's full of the self, waiting to be met. A soul that's walked its sands doesn't need the world's approval. They don't chase applause or fear silence. They carry the desert within, a quiet strength that no storm can shake. A man who's faced his Samatnist stands taller, not because he's alone, but because he's whole. A woman who's embraced hers shines brighter, not for others, but for herself. This strength reshapes the game. The chessboard is still there, pieces moving, traps lurking, but the player who's known Samatnist is different. They don't react to the world's noise. They respond to their own truth. They don't need to win every battle because they've won the war within. Their moves are deliberate, their heart clear. The desert taught them to see the board, not as a prison, but as a canvas. They play, not to survive, but to create. The truth lingers like a star in the desert sky. Samatnist is where the soul is born. It's not a place to escape, but a place to enter. It strips away the lies, the masks, the chains. What's left is pure, not perfect, but real. The one who's walked the desert carries its silence as a shield, its clarity as a sword. The game goes on, but they're no longer bound by its rules. They're free, not because they've left the board, but because they've found themselves upon it. The soul is a fortress, built brick by brick through choices, scars, and silent victories. True power lies not in conquering others, but in mastering the self. This is the heart of the game. To rule the mind, to tame the heart, to harness the shadow within. The world is a storm, chaotic, relentless, pulling at every weakness. The one who stands unshaken is the one who's forged their fortress, not from stone, but from discipline, clarity, and truth. This is the path to winning, not against the board, but within it. Mastery begins in the mind. Thoughts are wild horses, galloping toward fear, doubt, or fleeting pleasures. Left unchecked, they drag the soul off course. A man wakes to a flood of worries, bills, status, tomorrow's unknowns, and lets them steer his day. A woman replays a slight, a harsh word, and lets it color her worth. These aren't rare moments, they're the default. The mind is a battlefield, and most surrender without a fight. To master it is to take the reins, to guide the horses, not be pulled by them. It's a quiet act, but it shifts everything. Discipline is the first brick. It's not loud or flashy, it's steady, like a river carving stone. A man chooses to rise early, to work on his craft, even when exhaustion begs for sleep. A woman sets aside her phone, sitting with her thoughts, even when distraction calls. These aren't grand gestures. They're small, deliberate. Each choice builds the fortress, training the mind to act, not react. Discipline isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. A single step, repeated, becomes a path. A single brick, laid daily, becomes a wall. The heart is harder to tame. Emotions surge like waves, crashing without warning. Anger flares at a careless word. Fear grips at an uncertain future. Joy fades under routine's weight. A man hides his pain, thinking it weak, only to see it erupt in ways he can't control. A woman rides the tide of her feelings, losing sight of her own strength. The heart isn't the enemy, but it's a force. To master it is to feel deeply, yet choose wisely. It's to pause in anger, to breathe through fear, to hold joy lightly. This isn't suppression. It's sovereignty. The shadow, that dark mirror of the self, must be ruled too. It's the voice of old wounds, hidden desires, unspoken truths. A man ignores it, chasing success to silence his doubts, only to find they grow louder. A woman buries it, pleasing others to avoid her shame, only to feel it tighten its grip. Mastery doesn't mean destroying the shadow. It means knowing it, naming it, using it. A man who sees his fear as a signal, not a master, moves forward. A woman who owns her desires, not their whispers, chooses her path. The shadow becomes a guide, not a chain. This work is solitary, but not lonely. The fortress is built in quiet moments, before dawn, in the pause between tasks, in the stillness of a walk. A man reflects on his day, noting where he faltered, where he stood firm. A woman journals her fears, tracing their roots, finding their limits. These acts are invisible to the world, but they're the foundation of power. The chessboard rewards noise, grand gestures, loud wins. The fortress rewards silence, small choices, steady growth. The world sees the victory, not the work that shaped it. Mastery reshapes the game. A soul that rules itself doesn't flinch at the board's traps. A man who's tamed his mind doesn't chase fleeting praise. He builds for meaning. A woman who's mastered her heart doesn't cling to false loves. She seeks what's true. They're not immune to pain or temptation, but they're not swayed by them. Their fortress stands, not to shut out the world, but to meet it on their terms. They move with purpose, not because the board demands it, but because they've chosen it. The paradox is clear. The greatest power is invisible. It's not in wealth, status, or control over others. It's in the quiet strength of a soul that answers to itself. The one who's built their fortress doesn't need to shout their worth. They live it. The chessboard is still there, pieces shifting, stakes rising. But the player who rules themselves is free, not from the game, but within it. They don't just play, they command. Their next move is always their own. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.